Darwinian evolution. Junk science.
Well, here's another word for us, elitist. The noun here is a person having, thought to have, or professing superior intellect or talent, power, wealth, or membership in the upper echelons of society. And another definition, a person who believes in the superiority of an elitist class. According to this definition, was Charles Darwin an elitist? Did he believe that he was part of a class that had special privileges and was better than others? Did he support that class? As a matter of fact, he was part of that class. All of the so-called scientists of that era were part of that class. And a lot of what they did and what they wrote, a lot of their motivation was to rise up in the esteem of that class and to please the people, the moneyed people in that class. That's what they did. So when we read these things that Darwin said that elevated the elitist class at the expense of everybody else, what is that about? Is that really about science? Or is it about politics? You see what I'm saying? Very suspect, isn't it? This brings us to something called social Darwinism. This is looking at Darwinism as it affects society. The term Darwinism had been coined by Thomas Henry Huxley in his April 1860 review on the origin of species. Some people say that Bible believers made up the term Darwinism, and it was never called that. And actually, it was called that from as early as 1860. The first use of the phrase social Darwinism was in 1877. And this was in an article published in the Transactions of the Royal Historical Society. You see, in England, they had a lot of these elitist organizations. And that's where they published this kind of information for these elitists. Social Darwinism is a name given to various phenomena emerging in the second half of the 19th century, trying to apply biological concepts of natural selection and survival of the fittest in human society. Now, what you see pictured here are some of the key figures in social Darwinism, starting with Darwin himself. Actually, Darwin got some of his ideas from someone who came before him by the name of Malthus. And Malthus basically taught about population in human society. He wrote an essay on the principle of population. And in his essay, he explains that if you allow the lower class to just continue to breed, eventually that's going to spill over and destroy life for everybody, including the upper class. So you've got to do something to stop that population. That's basically what Malthus taught, a very elitist kind of teaching. And he basically said we have to be cruel to be kind. Essentially, we've got to kill off these people for their own good. That's the Malthus idea. Isn't that advanced thinking, scientific thinking? What do you think of that? Well, what happened with Darwin is he took that elitist idea about society and he simply then adopted it and put the same idea to work to create his idea of natural selection. It's the same idea, only just in a little different light, a little different twist. So it shouldn't be surprising that Darwin agreed with Malthus and on the basis of his theory said things very much the same. Now here's some quotes. He said, "We build asylums for the imbecile, the maimed, and the sick. We institute poor laws. Today we call that welfare. And our medical men exert their utmost skills to save the life of everyone to the last moment. If we do not prevent the inferior members of society from increasing at a quicker rate than the better class of men, the nation will retrograde, as has occurred too often in the history of the world." So what is his implication? Stop helping the so-called lesser grade of men, right? Let them die. If they get sick, don't give them medical care. Don't have welfare. Don't give special help to the sick, the maimed, or those who are mentally impaired. Let them die off. Let those people all die off. And that is what we should do for the good of the human race. That's basically what his theory was. Well, Francis Galton was Darwin's cousin. And he was very impressed with Darwin's work. They talked about it. He took the kind of ideas that I was just sharing with you from Darwin, and he began his own theory called eugenics, which is simply taking what Malthus and Darwin said to a new and higher level, or I should say a new and lower level. And what he invented was a scheme of marks for family merit to define the worth of a given family. And those who got good family marks, the elite, they should receive money. They should receive support from society to encourage them to have more children. And those who were considered inferior, well, they shouldn't be allowed to have children at all. He said the weak could find a welcome and a refuge in celibate monasteries or sisterhoods. And this ended up getting taken far beyond that. So this social Darwinism really is part of something else called scientific racism. And they make a distinction between these two things as if somehow social Darwinism is not racist because it's made up of people that are still held in high esteem by the scientific community. But in reality, it's the same thing. It too is racist. Scientific racism includes Darwinian evolution and offered scientific justification for European colonialism, not to mention the lucrative slave trade. All of the accepted scientists, with Darwin raised up as the very foremost among them, were Europeans, ultimately giving scientific support to the superiority of the people who paid their bills. Don't you respect that as science? Not me. And as I put here, beware, science has always been a prostitute for the elite. They're the ones that pay the bills. Science is really a tool of the elite. This is why you shouldn't just believe it, because it comes from some study or from somebody who has a PhD behind his name. There are people who profit and benefit from something that is considered scientific. Now, that was true in the 19th century. Look at this map of Africa. See the little light green part? That's the only part of Africa that was not completely colonized by the Europeans. All the other colors you see on there, that's all areas of Africa that were divided up to the different European nations. Now, can you understand why they would support an idea like Darwinian evolution? Why were they there in Africa? To steal everything in Africa. That's why they were there. They were thieves. They were going into a place that did not belong to them, where they were stronger, where they were more powerful, and they were taking what they wanted. That's what they were doing. And they needed a moral justification for that in the eyes of the soldiers that they sent to die there to make them rich. And Darwinian evolution gave them the excuse they needed. We're the superior race. It's survival of the fittest. It's us or them. If we don't do this now, eventually they'll be the ones doing it to us. So let's go in there and take over. That's what Darwinian evolution is about. Making money for the elite at the expense of the blood of everybody else. This is the picture we used in our title. This depicts what was going on in Africa during colonialism. These red-clad soldiers were British soldiers at war with the indigenous people there in Africa. It was Darwinism that gave them scientific justification to go in and dominate the so-called savages. That's what evolution is about. It didn't just happen in Africa. Here in the United States, the indigenous people in America were virtually wiped out. And this too was justified by Darwinian evolution. One historian says, the Eurocentric wave of U.S. occupation of indigenous lands appeared grounded in a wanton racial stereotype of Native Americans as an inferior race. So inferior that causing their extinction was a benefit to the human species. We're helping mankind by killing these people. Is that not a monstrous idea? Does that sound scientific to you? Or does that sound like just another excuse for what mankind has been doing almost since the beginning? It goes on, U.S. society, including scientists, was awash in social Darwinism and eugenics. The social Darwinism that developed in the Atlantic world as a justification for colonialism and genocide, not just in North America, but all the Americas, the Caribbean, South Asia, the Middle East, the Pacific, and especially Africa. How many people were abused and murdered because of this horrible doctrine of Darwinian evolution? I don't think we could even begin to count up the numbers.
Was this video informative? Click the like button below to help spread the word to others. Feel free to leave a comment and share your thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you won't miss out on more amazing content from Eliyahu Ben David.